Hey guys, it's Tyler with TCG Rewind. Today I wanted to talk about some of the recent tournaments we had in the Tengu Plant Discord. We had Tengu Rumble 3, which is the tournament where you have 72 hours to play out your matches. So, if you can't commit to a full day of tournament, you can kind of schedule a match with your opponent and that, kind of progresses over time. Super convenient for those with busier schedules. And yeah, if you guys are interested in playing in any of these tournaments, I'll put a link to the Tengu Plant Discord in the description below. But the first one we want to talk about is Tengu Rumble 3. I actually played in this tournament and I lost. But, you know, uh, regardless of my performance, there was still a lot of cool things that happened in this tournament. But first, we got to look at this metagame breakdown. This is actually crazy to me. It's the Age of the Heroes, guys. And Age of the Heroes means a lot of different things. I always talk about Tengu Plant format being a very fluid format in the sense that different decks become stronger at different points based on what's popular. And right now, heroes are extremely popular. And because heroes are extremely popular, decks like X-Sabers or even other like TG decks, stuff like that, they're going to start rising in viability. That's one thing I can take at least from this, and even the other tournament had a lot of heroes. We'll get into that, but we had 5 heroes, 4 hero beat, 1 Neos heroes, 3 Tengu Plant, 3 TG, 1 KFC, 1 Scrap, 1 Gravekeeper, 1 Worms, 1 Nordic, 1 Jurrac, 1 Falcon Punch, 1 Amazon, 1 Zombie, 1 Disaster Dragon, 1 Gadget, 1 Water Synchro, and 1 Card Curry. So, like I said, things we can take away from this meta here is there's no agents being played. There was also no chaos being played. And when there's no agents and no chaos being played, it means that this is a really good time to play X-Sabers. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's my first thought. Like, X-Sabers are kind of fire right now. Just because of how popular heroes are. People are spamming it. I see so many back row decks. Chaos and agents are some of X-Sabers' harder matchups. And they're nowhere to be seen. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But let's take a look at the top 4. Out of all these decks, there were 4 that reigned supreme. So we'll start here. This was the first place list. This was Blaze Phoenix's Tengu Plant list. Very similar to the last one he opted to run. We have Lila, we have the mill strategy. And honestly, looking at their replays, I saw crazy, crazy mills. One thing I will say I really like about their list, and this is something I've been starting to consider as well, is Puppet Plant. Because of the fact that heroes are just so prevalent, this card's so nice. It's such a non-committal card, right? Like, if you have nothing on your field and your opponent just has an alias with back row, you can lead your turn with a Puppet Plant, right? And then, like, outside of like having a Book of Moon for your tuner or something like that, they're going to be in an awkward position because they can't like Gemini Spark if you have nothing on your field, right? So I do kind of like Puppet Plant. I think this is a really good way to like synchro with your opponent's board and kind of remove some of their board presence. Even just taking a Shining and swinging in for game, like, really, really powerful card. So I'm a big fan of the Puppet Plant. I also like they opted to add an enemy controller. I think that was like one of the changes they talked about making, how like they removed Lance for enemy controller. So yeah, and then I see 2 Max C's. I mean, there's no... Okay, only opting aside 2 Max C. That's also interesting. That's something I've kind of considered as well. Just because I keep feeling like Max C's more and more dead, and especially if we look at this meta still, like, how many of these decks are actually hurt by Max C? Very few, right? So Max C is really starting to go down in viability to the point where, we're seeing 2 Valor in main and, only 2 Max C inside. I think that might be a smart ratio, low-key. Although I'm a big fan of Revaler. Yeah, other than that, pretty much the same list that they, topped with before. But, hey, some improvements had to have been made because, this is a winning list now, which is really cool. Blaze Phoenix is one of the primary Tengu Plant players in Tengu Plant format. One of the few people that stick with this deck, which is pretty cool. So going into the second place, we had Oriki. I gotta make sure I'm saying that right. Yeah, I'm just gonna say Oriki. I don't know. I'm hoping that's not like terribly incorrect. But yeah, they were playing TG, and this is a really cool TG list. I actually really like it. We're opting for pretty standard TG, except they added the spice of just throwing in Tour Guide and Senkin. I don't understand really the 1 Maxi main deck. I mean, again, I'm just a Valor kind of guy, which I guess like if you feel like you need Valor in game 1, you can always put in the skill drain, but it almost just looks like they're like, I want a side 3 max C, but I don't have the space, so we'll just main one of them. That's what I think. Double Starlight Road is pretty cool. Like this can kind of catch people off guard. Only one TG1 EM1, which honestly I kind of like this ratio too. I've been tampering with TGs a bit myself, and I will say that this card, while it's really, really good, it also is weirdly bricky because sometimes you just don't have TGs, which sounds really weird, but it's just true. Like, it's better to have a card like Deep Prison or something that does something independent rather than something that relies on another card. Like, this is a 2-card combo, this is a 1-card combo, right? But yeah, really like this list, especially because they opt to side into skill drain, which again, that might be why Valor is just not a factor for this deck. That is just like Maxi and no Valor. It's a bit risky because I feel like you're very vulnerable to like game 1 Trishes, and Trish is something that can really blow this deck out. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the fix is because I agree with siding the skill drain. I guess you just kind of run that risk, and maybe the Maxi is something that can kind of help with it. But I feel like Trish is super easy to make in a lot of the popular decks right now as well. So just something to think about. We're respecting the Kree side-in with the triple MSC. Also, I like that we're opting for TG Power Gladiator. You know, just running a couple more of those level 5 TG Synchros. These cards are actually pretty good. Like, I like them a lot just because they float. So it's like, one of the worst things you can do in TGs is actually synchro. Like, it sucks to synchro with your cards because you just want them to sit there and float. But if you need to deal with something, if you can make a 2300 beater or even a 1900 beater and like pop something and then, you know, get a draw, feels pretty good. But yeah, that's a pretty cool TG list. Again, it makes sense that this deck did well because, like I said, I feel like TGs is a pretty strong meta call right now, so I'm not surprised. And then in 3rd place, we had Himne, who was playing Neos Heroes. And I actually am kind of a big fan of Neos Heroes. You know, I posted about it, the poll, people are talking about seeing my list and stuff like that. I won't go into too much detail on my list until I eventually do a video on it, because I would like to. But we'll talk about Himne's, which honestly, it feels completely fine. We're opting for the 1 copy of Prisma to send Neos, and then even Neos Knight. I like this card because low-key, if you let's say you have like an alias on board, like, and especially with heroes being so popular, mirror is very likely. Like, but let's say you have an alias on board and you have nothing to do that turn, you can just normal summon it again for its Gemini for it to be Elemental Hero Neos, and then you can like do cool fusions with Neos Knight, low key. Because this card's like not bad. It can like attack twice and has Omega huge attack. I think that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, my only thing that I'm kind of preaching about with Neos Heroes is I really think Oversoul is super worth in this deck because you can just slam a 2500 attack beater from the graveyard, which I think is really cool. Himne doing the Falcon Punch special of only 1 of each hand trap, which again, I just think these ratios are so bizarre, but hey, you know, to each their own. Also, I will say, because I think this is a bit larger of a monster count, I don't know how I feel about 3 of these, but I guess there's no Rhoda, so it's just E-Call, no Rhoda. I mean, I guess, sure, just keep it consistent. So maybe that's okay ratio without the Rhoda. I think 4 would have been too much, but yeah, seems fine. Rivalry in main deck, this is really interesting. I don't know how many decks this impacts, and especially because of the fact that there's so many like potential mirrors. I don't know if this is like actually super good or not. So I'd be interested to know how it tested for Himne. I'm sure Himne will comment below on how he felt about it. But yeah, other than that, I like Karma Cut. I really like this card. I think this card's super good in this format. Like, there's so many floaters. There's so many ways this like punishes your opponent. Hitting like a glow up bulb or something is really, really strong. I personally would prefer to see it mained. So I actually think Karma Cut's really good and almost getting better. Like, imagine if your opponent has an alias on field and you hit it with a Karma Cut. Like, I know, like, they can potentially chain a Gemini Spark, but if there's a world where you hit it and hit the others in your opponent's grave, could be big, right? There's some cool stuff with that card. Elemental Hero Terra Firma. I don't even know what this is. Ocean and Woodsman. Oh, I guess this lets you send Ocean with Prisma, so you can make Absolute Zero. I guess that's what that would be. It's like a 1-card Absolute Zero if you have Miracle Fusion, which is kind of cool. So a couple different uses for Prisma. But yeah, that was the 3rd place list. We'll move on to the 4th place. And, you know, we got Himne's partner in crime, Dark Signer, busting out the Falcon Punch. Standard performance for Falcon Punch. You know, I talked about it in my tier list. This is like that deck that I feel like can top, but because people know how to play against it, I don't know if it's like able to win, or I think it's a little bit harder to win with. But I do think it's super cool. Like, I still go back and I'll watch like some of the replays and stuff of like Dark Signer playing this deck in this tournament, and like there's so many cool turns where you just plus a million off of a limit reverse or something like that. It's super sick. And I do feel like this is a clean list. Looks pretty standard. Nothing too out of the ordinary in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know if this was originally in there, the Blackwing Armed Wing. I'm not even sure how it's made. I guess with like a Card Trooper or a Sangan. Yeah, that's probably it. But low-key, I mean, it's probably troll, but low-key Vayu could be cool in this deck. Like some small Vayu engine, just because you can mill it off the Card Troopers. I don't know. It's probably bad. But yeah, that was Tengu Rumble, or Tengu Rumble 3. There was quite a few players in it, but this was the top 4, so super diverse representation of top 4. We're going to move on to Tengu Plant Takeover, and this is our monthly tournament that happens in the Discord, so this one you actually do have to show up for on the day. And again, heroes. See this? Heroes are taking over. We had 2 Worm, though, which is kind of cool. Jurrac is still seeing representation. Shout out to Amazing Mike, man. You know, he wants to make it worth. This wasn't me playing zombies. That was Necro. And then we had 1 Tengu Plant, 1 Scrap, 1 X-Saber, 1 Dragoonity, 1 Water Synchro, 1 Garden Control, 1 Volcanic Quick Draw, 1 Gladiator Beast, 1 Light Sorn, 1 TG. I think the Garden Control was actually KFC. It was Jaina. Almost positive. But, yeah, so have a relatively diverse showing. And again, no agents, no chaos. So low-key, honestly, those decks could be really strong too. I think, like, there's people always speculate on the agents maining Decree, and there's a world where that could just be super strong right now, where that just like wins against everything, because there are so many decks right now with like hella traps. But yeah, we'll look at the top 4. In first place, we had Jeppy. Jeppy with Hero Beat. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, but yeah, basic standard Hero Beat here. I mean, we're seeing the 2 Snowman Eater. This is pretty interesting just because there's a world where you know, your opponent doesn't expect more than 1 of this card. Kind of interesting. But for the most part, it just looks like a very clean deck. Like, I don't really have any complaints about this list. I think it looks reliable, looks pretty smart. Although personally, I'm a bigger fan of smaller monster counts in heroes, like as small as humanly possible, because I just feel like it's very unlikely that you're going to need higher monster counts. You have so many searchers for your deck, and once you get a Stratos on board, you're big chillin'. But yeah, and then, you know, it wouldn't be the age of the heroes if second place wasn't also heroes. So we have Halfar playing Hero Beat, opting for the Evocator Chevalier. You know, my pronunciation, I'm sorry. But opting for this is pretty cool. It's just an extra Gemini that gives you the option to go Nova Master. Nova Master, I think, is a really cool card because it's basically just Horn of the Phantom Beast on a fusion. It lets you pop, you know, destroy a monster, draw a card, which is sick. And then there actually is a skill drain in main, which is really interesting. I wonder how this tested, because I'm personally not a fan of main deck skill drain, but maybe it actually worked out for them. We're also seeing 2 Maxi, 2 Valor. This is like a fine ratio if you want to go for that. But again, I'm still a preacher of the 3 Valor main, or 3 in 1. But yeah, we got the Honest. Honest is like pretty much a staple in Heroes at this point. I don't know if it ever wasn't, but I feel like in earlier builds this wasn't. But this card is just so broken. This card has blew me out so much in that Tengu Rumble tournament. It was crazy. But yeah, Future Fusion in main. Were we running Future Fusion? Were all the decks running Future Fusion? Let me check. There's Future Fusion there. Yeah, so all of them are playing Future Fusion, which is, I mean, it makes sense. It's a very powerful card. That was another card that really didn't see a lot of play historically, I don't think. And then it looks like we're opting for the Captain Gold Sky Scraper engine. I really don't know what you side this in against. Maybe the Mirror? I don't know. Let me know in the comments what this is for. Because, I mean, I understand why it's good, but I'm just trying to think of, like, what beats over you. Because, yeah, I don't even know. And then third place, this was big. Amazing Mike Man has been pushing for the Jurrac meta. He's been trying his heart out to make Jurracs a playable strategy. And in all honesty, he succeeded. You know, he got third place in this monthly tournament with Jurrac. Low-key, I think Jurrac actually can be pretty decent, especially in a format like this where, like, you're going against heroes and stuff like that. For example, if you summon a Guaiba and attack their alias, they have to spark you. And, like, because you could just hit them with a Shrink or a Lance. And if you have a combination of both, you can actually turn off the spark, you know, like, or even if you have Lance and you attack and they have to, before damage step, activate the spark, right? So you can Lance your own monster and then they don't even get the draw, which is really, really cool. So, I mean, low-key, it's not that bad. Especially being able to swing in and do damage and, like, activate cards in the damage step. You have 3 searchers for every card in your engine. My personal gripe is I really feel like Tengu is super good in this deck. Once you get it on field, any combination of Guaiba or something just results in a potential Trish play off of, like, a single attack. And I just think that's way too strong. So I'm curious if Amazing Mike Man has tampered with that. We also need to talk about the fact that I think Jaina pointed this out, but it was like, how many tuners? There's 3, 6, so 8 tuners, and we're not running mind control. I definitely think when half your monsters are tuners, you should be running mind control. That's just way too good. And like I said, I think it's like the best card in Tengu Plant format. So I think Mike said he was gonna, you know, work on that. Also, we gotta talk about the triple Jurrac Ganoto. I really, you know, Amazing Mike Man, if you're watching this video, please let me know in the comments why we're opting to run 3 of this card. And also Jurrac Velveto. I don't even know what this card does. This card's attacking are equal to total original attack of the synchro material used for the synchro summon. Okay, so this card gets big attack. If you synchro, it has to be a 1. So like 1900 is the most you're gonna get out of it. If this card attacks face down, you can destroy the monster immediately with this card effect without flipping a face upper. So, like, this just outs random set cards. Technically outs Snowman Eater, stuff like that against heroes. So maybe that's the purpose of it. It's kind of cool. But I have no idea how practical this was. So Amazing Mike Man, let me know about your extra deck here. I don't know. I want to know how viable this stuff was. X-Saber Irabellum is an interesting card to, like, kind of throw in there. We also got to talk about Molten Destruction. I want to know when this was sided in and why it wasn't just main. Low-key, it's kind of cool. Like, all fire monsters gain 500 attack. You know, like, you're summoning 2200 attack, you know, Guaivas or Dinos. There's no way that's not just, like, stronger in main, right? Like, you know, if you're going to run it, like, I certainly wouldn't run, like, terraforming or anything to search it. It would just be, like, a one of, like, hey, this is an Omni boost for my entire deck. Seems kind of cool. But again, I really am curious what this was sided in. Maybe this is something you side in against heroes, because you can just attack over their all their monsters at that point. Like 19 is no longer threatening. But yeah, super curious about this list. Shout outs to Amazing Mike Man. Like, he has been running Jurrac in literally every single tournament. Like, every time you see the one Jurrac, it's usually him. which is just really cool. You know, clearly, like, he's passionate about this list, about this deck, and making it work. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor, you know, coming in with, you know, a 3rd place finish in a monthly tournament. So that's really, really cool. And then 4th place, this is another really spicy list. We're playing Worms with Tour Guide. And I actually really like this approach because there's like the Chaos Engine, and with Tour Guide, this opens up the ability to like bring in Yagen. There's also a spicy Fossil Dynamain, which I think this is kind of cool too, because like, let's say you set a Yagen, you know, like 9 times out of 10 when you're setting a card, you're setting Yagen or Carteros. So your opponent might just go off and be like, hey, you can only bounce 1 card, who cares? And then you just flip a Fossil Dyna and blow them out. I think that's really cool too. My only gripe with this deck is I feel like it's super monster heavy, right? Like, personally, I don't like. I wonder how viable this Fossil Dyna was, because I see the logic behind it, but I also think that it's kind of risky business because of how many monsters you're running. I like the Tour Guide a lot because Yagon gets banished already, so you can Leviair it back. I see a Grenosaurus here. I'm not sure why. maybe it's just like Cowboy for game. I guess like having all the extra deck options is pretty interesting. One thing I will say, decks like Worms, or any deck that doesn't have a big side deck, or like extra deck, I mean, like doesn't need a ton of cards in extra, I really think it's important for them to side Super Poly and main the Shining. I think it's super good. Like, you confuse with like, heroes are super popular right now, you confuse with your opponent's boards and like just take every monster they have. I think it's pretty viable in this deck. You can pitch like Dead Yagons or even Worm King. And that's another thing. We're just risking it for the biscuit with the Worm King. Like, I'm pretty sure you can't use this card. Oh yeah, you can. So you can use the draw effect without Worm King. So it's not a huge deal, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's not really that risky. Maybe it's just better to run 1 Worm King. It's your Garnet. You open it, it sucks, but if you don't, it's really strong. But yeah, I actually really, really like this list. I see Soul Taker inside. That might be for copies of the Shining and stuff like that to deal with your opponent's hero boards. Leeching the Light, a 3rd Fossil Dyna, 3 DD Crow, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, going for like a Chaos Worm build, and it actually worked out. Like, I've always kind of talked about how I think Worms are strong and have potential to be strong. They just need the right build, and this kind of looks like a step in the right direction for Worms. I think this probably could be optimized a bit more, but still, 4th place with this wacky build. It's really cool. Again, I do like that we can abuse BLS in this deck. I think that's smart. You know, they're all lights, you know, so. But yeah, that's pretty much all the decks that have kind of came up in the recent tournaments. Like I said, we're on Age of the Heroes, guys, which means there needs to be the Revolution. The Revolution, in my opinion, is going to be X-Sabers. So I would be on the lookout for that deck. I think X-Sabers are very viable right now. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about these lists. If you were the people who played this list, you know, kind of maybe try to explain some of your takes or decks or choices, because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested as well as me. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys, and make sure you guys have a great time dueling today.